we're in now is what clickbait is. Now, clickbait, that's Clickbait, is news which is designed for you to just click on it. That's it. It's clickbait. It literally is clickbait. It's baiting you to click on it. How does it do that? Well, it's actually kind of easy. And it's one of those things where it's super easy to pull off because all you have to do is say, 12 easy ways to lose weight that you won't believe. My husband couldn't believe number 3. And that's clickbait. And you click and you get sort of curious. You're like, man, what is that? And you click on it and now you've given them money. Now, you might be saying, I never gave them my credit card information. How am I giving them money? Well, these websites run ads, and that's fine. Ads are totally necessary to run a website, unless it's a nonprofit or it's a donation-based thing. Ads are totally fine to have on your website. I'm not knocking ads on websites. I would be totally hypocritical in doing that, seeing as we have ads on our radio station here, and we're very glad to have our sponsors. No, the thing is, it's news which is designed, and it's barely even news, which is designed simply for the purposes of making money. It's not like this is here to be informative, and it just so happens we also make money off of it. It's not like that. It's more, this is news which we've sort of fabricated and fudged some of the details, and we've made up a headline that's totally emotional in order for you to click on it. And it's cheap. I'll put it that way. As somebody who cares, and I know you do too, cares a lot about the news and being factual and having all the information, it drives me nuts when there's a news story that you see a headline for and it's just total nonsense. And it drives me nuts. And I know it frustrates you too, because we want to have factual news. We want to have information that is real, it's to the point, it's accurate. We want that, right? And hopefully we can deliver that to you here on Hot News Talk Radio. I feel pretty confident that we do. But unfortunately, you're not going to find that everywhere online. It's one of those things where people say, don't believe everything that you read online. And you really shouldn't. A lot of us fall into that trap. I do too. I'm guilty of that, where I read something online, I think, wow, it's outrageous. And then I find out later that it's totally untrue. So we fall into that trap a lot. And it's okay, but you have to understand that not everything you read on the internet comes from a reputable source. Put it that way. I'll give you an example. Just recently, there have been reports of a Twitter account that tweeted a interesting tweet. We'll put it that way. It was a photo that was posted on Twitter of somebody who appeared to be in jihadi dress. We'll put it that way. Somebody who looked like your traditional member of ISIS that you would see on the news. We all know the image, and we're supposed to, right? That's the point of the picture. Pointing a knife at the camera, as you've seen pictures of them do before. And the tweet was that photo accompanied with a tweet saying, it would be terrible if something happened in #Chattanooga or something along those lines. Now, that's freaky, right? Because it was posted supposedly the day before yesterday. And we all know what happened then. So it seems freaky. We're all freaking out. We see that tweet and we go, man, I can't believe it. There must have been foreknowledge. Well, that tweet is easily fabricated. That's the thing. I can't find any real accurate record of that having actually happened. The source is questionable, we'll put it that way, and it's super easy to fabricate a news headline. I mean, seriously, I've done it as a joke before, not to pass it off as real news, certainly not, but it was a joke between some friends and I. It was a BuzzFeed thing. Nobody takes them seriously anyway. So it's super easy to fabricate something, especially a tweet. In fact, if you're in Firefox, all you have to do is right click and do inspect element, and then find the specific lines in the HTML, and you can just edit them and change whatever text you want to change. It's easy. So it's not hard at all to fabricate a news headline such as that. And again, it's entirely possible that that did happen, but without any proper verification, I'm not going to report that as factual. And that's the pure fact of the matter. I can't report something as factual if it's not proven, if it's not proven to be true. I can't report that as factual. I can say unconfirmed, but if it's not confirmed, I can't say, hey, look, this happened. I can't do that. I won't do that because I'm not that kind of reporter. I'm not a yellow journalist. I'm not any of that. So I'm not going to do that. And that's something that's extremely important in journalism, is to understand that not everything you read online is true and factual. And you see that especially on social media. Social media has done a lot in terms of bringing us the news in ways that were impossible 10 years ago. But unfortunately, there's a side effect of a lot of nonsense being put online that is flat out not true. Okay, I'll give you an example. You'll see something, a headline from conservativetribune.org, which doesn't sound very reputable to me. Sure, they have a cool name, but I don't know. So the headline is something like Stone Mountain, Georgia to be sandblasted tomorrow. And the whole point of that is for you to click on that and get angry. It's an emotional response. It's geared to make you have an emotional response. That's kind of yellow journalism, and it's also not illegal, of course, but it's less than ethical. We'll put it that way. It's exactly geared for you to have an emotional response when you see that, and to share it on Facebook so more people click on it, more people see the ads, and the site in question makes more money. Simple as that. Now, if we were a station that was geared at making money off of all of the news, we would be much richer than we are. If we made tons of money off of every click that you gave us, we would make a lot more money than we actually do now. So we're definitely not geared that way. I would not care at all if I got paid 50 cents a day. I would still give you the news as I do today. Nothing would change. If I made $1 million or if I made 50 cents, I would report exactly the same way. Take from that what you will. You don't have to believe me when I say that. Certainly, you should question everything, and that's good. You have to have critical thinking. We all do. That's just the nature of it. Critical thinking is extremely important for any sort of gathering of information, because we have to be able to discern, okay, is this real? Is this confirmed? Is this something that's more questionable than anything, or what's going on with this? We have to determine that when we're looking at the news. That's something incredibly important. So the idea of clickbait, again, is you go on Facebook and you see some headline that you think is just totally outrageous, like Obama wants to ban Confederate flags. And you see that and you freak out, understandably. You think, man, that's my heritage, that's my culture, you can't do that. So you see that and you share it and you post your opinion about it, which is fine. And people share that and get angry, and that's the whole point. But it's not a real story. That's the point of it. It's not a real story because it comes from like your headlines today, it's totallyreal.com, and it's actually a blog, right? That happens a lot. You'd be surprised. There are a lot of news sites, or rather fake news sites, which people think are actual news sites, which are actually blogs. That happens a lot. Now, there are different ways of getting independent reporting from, we'll say, non-professional journalists, amateur journalists, which I'm fine with. You go on Twitter and you see reports from photos from eyewitnesses, and that's great. It's some of the best reporting you can get is from somebody on the ground who's not a professional. Some of the best reporting I've ever seen came from people who were not professional reporters. I mean, it's not Charlie Rose there on the ground. It's not Peter Jennings there on the ground. May he rest in peace. It's not somebody like those people who are extremely reputable reporters, obviously, but they're not there on the scene. And if you're not there on the scene, you can't give all the information. So we see a lot of really great reports from people who are tweeting them on Twitter, posting on Facebook. You see stuff on Instagram. You see lots of cool stuff that you wouldn't get from an actual real professional news source, because they're not going to take the risk of sending a guy in there with a smartphone to take photos where they could get kicked out. So we saw a lot of really good reporting coming out of different sources, both professional and amateur, on Twitter yesterday, and it really was great. Some of the reporting we saw was the best reporting I've ever seen from amateurs, and I don't mean amateurs in a disparaging way, because I was one for a long time. And that's just the nature of it, you know. Maybe these guys will get to be they'll get paid by a network to be professional, and I hope so. But it's not all the reporting that you see from an official source is real, and not all the reporting that you see from an amateur source is fake. So you have to have critical thinking. We have to be able to determine what is real and what is not. The best way to determine that is if the headline has an emotional twinge to it, if it makes you angry just by reading it, and you can tell it's designed to do that, is probably not real. That's just the nature of it. You know, you're not going to see CNN or Fox put out a headline that's Obama wants to do such and such. Probably that's not what you're going to see from any sort of reputable news site, because that's not how it works. News headlines don't work that way. They're not geared to make you angry. They're geared to give you the news in a factual manner. So when you see an emotional news headline, use your critical thinking, because we're smart folks, right? Sometimes we get mad, sometimes we get upset, and sometimes we don't use our best judgment when it comes to gathering the news. So you have to be extremely critical in your thinking, especially in a situation like the one that we just had, where we had an active shooter situation, and there was lots of information going all over the place. There was all sorts of info all at the same time pouring all over the place, and it was hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. Now, fortunately, yesterday we had a really unique situation, I think, where we were in a time of tragedy, and we were in a time where things were happening in a way that were fast. It was fast and loose when it came to the reporting yesterday. And I'm very proud, very happy to say that I didn't see a lot of emotional headlines, people getting angry on Twitter. I didn't really see a whole lot of that. And that's a real testament to our mindset here in the Chattanooga area. That really is a testament to that, where a lot of the time we like to tout our city as how great it is. And sometimes it seems like, oh, we're just like everybody else, but really that's not the case. Here in Chattanooga, we are such a unique city here. And I say that not even as a potentially as a native Chattanooga. Now, full disclosure, I actually live in Ringgold, but I spend most of my time here, so I sort of have assimilated into the culture, I suppose. Some might consider Ringgold to be part of the bigger metropolitan area anyway. So most of the people who live in Ringgold hang out in Chattanooga most of the time anyway. But no, it really is exemplifying what a great city we have here with what we saw yesterday, with what we're seeing today, with all the outpouring. Think of all the prayer vigils that were put up. I think there were 5 or 6, maybe 6 or 7 that popped up. And it really showed what a great, I guess, heart that our city has, where we were seeing people who were not angry. They weren't wanting the wrath of God to pour down. We didn't really see that. We saw people who were concerned, who cared about the people who died. And we saw people who were killed, I should say. And we saw people who were really just an outpouring of good nature and goodwill toward men. And that's something that we need. That's the right way to handle a situation like that. And I have to say, it makes me almost a little bit emotional to think about it. That's what we saw here yesterday and today, and we're still seeing it. And that's the right way to handle it. That's absolutely the correct way to handle a situation like the one we had yesterday. And really, it's still ongoing because the aftershock is still there. I don't know if you know, but I was on the air for about 6 hours yesterday, 6 hours total. That's not a testament to how great I am. That's the job. And I couldn't have done it without the other reporters here on the news staff here at Hot News Talk Radio. So I want to take a second to thank them. Eric Judd, who you may have heard just a few minutes ago here at 11 o'clock. He did an excellent job calling in, giving us more information here on Hot News Talk Radio. Eric Judd did a wonderful job. I want to thank him. David Toulis, who showed up, who gave us some coverage, gave us commentary. He was at the news conference, the press conference that was at 3 o'clock yesterday. He did an excellent job in reporting. Couldn't have done the newscast without him. The other owner of the radio station, Mike Bullitt, as he likes to call himself, gave us information. He was tweeting information out over the social media. If you're on Twitter, then you follow Hot News Talk Radio. You probably saw his tweets. Really great reporting came out of him on the social media side that I wasn't even aware of because I was too busy being on the air here. He was also texting information at me so I could keep you updated. And even to some of the other news sources, the other reporters here that work for other organizations were extremely helpful. We all were working together. It wasn't a atmosphere of competition. I wasn't getting that at all because I was tweeting at people from Channel 9 and Channel 3 and Channel 12, and we were all tweeting at each other and giving each other information. It wasn't like we were all competing. There may have been some on the higher up side, but as reporters, we were all just wanting to give you information because that's what it comes down to. And it's about keeping you informed, and that really transcends business lines. It's about keeping you informed. And really, it was a exemplification of a local economy spirit because we weren't caring that much about, the competition here. No, we were helping each other out. And that's both capitalism and that is local economy exemplified. Somebody who knows a lot more about local economy than I do is David Toulis, and his show is on Hot News Talk Radio right here from 1 to 3. And again, he was at the press conference yesterday. He asked some very hard-hitting questions about the NSA involvement that may have been present with the activity that happened yesterday. And he asked some very hard-hitting questions yesterday, and he's going to be on the air today, as he always is, every weekday here from 1 to 3 here on Hot News Talk Radio. David Toulis of Nuganomics.com, here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and HotNewsTalkRadio.com. We're everywhere. Go to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at HotNewsTalkRadio.com. I know we had a lot of traffic yesterday. And get the TuneIn app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Well, something that we have that really does exemplify local economy spirit is the sharing economy. Now, local economy doesn't have to be here. It is here, but it doesn't have to be here when it comes to, it's not like local economy is something that's exclusive to Chattanooga. We're very good at it here, but it's not like it's an exclusive thing. And that's part of the sharing too, is we get to share our spirit with other places, right? Where people who live in New York can learn from how we handle things here in Chattanooga, and vice versa. So one of the things that we have a really great system of here in Chattanooga is a sharing economy, where other businesses, small businesses, will actually help each other out. And yeah, there's competition there because that's just business, but there's also a sense of sharing and caring, and people actually do care about each other when it comes to other businesses, and it's great. Well, Ars Technica has a story here saying, watch out, sharing economy. The feds are watching this whole contractor thing. Well, a new policy guidance document was released earlier this week by the Department of Labor over the status of contract workers versus employees. And that's a question that's being asked quite a lot, is contract workers versus employee, what's the difference? Well, an employee is somebody who's on a permanent payroll. They sign a W-2 form, as an example. They pay their income taxes under their own volition, and they do all that sort of thing. They're the classic employee. I have no experience with that. However, contract workers are different. Contract workers are just what it sounds like, contract worker. They sign a contract, they do the job, that's it. And if they want to stay on longer, they sign another contract, they get the job done, that's it. So a contract worker is a little bit more relaxed than a full-on employee is. Although I would argue that a contract worker may actually be perhaps a harder worker than an employee might be, because the contract worker has clear guidelines for the job, and he will lose that contract if he doesn't do the job. Whereas an employee may have a little bit of leeway. If the job doesn't get done, then the boss says, okay, you know what, give you a second chance here. You don't really get that luxury when you're a contractor. Well, a new policy guidance document was released earlier this week by the Department of Labor over the status of contract workers versus employees. The 13-page guidance, according to Ars Technica, does not represent new law, but it does suggest that various regulatory agencies, including the federal level, are looking much more closely at how contract workers are treated. A number of high-profile tech companies, including Uber, Lyft, HomeJoy, and Instacart, have come under scrutiny in recent months as an increasing number of workers have challenged the regime under which they work. Last month, the California Labor Commission issued a ruling in favor of a former Uber employee, ordering the company to reimburse her for costs incurred while driving for Uber. Many of those companies are now facing lawsuits arguing that their workers should in fact be treated as employees, where Social Security and other benefits were be paid by the company rather than independent laborers, which seems to defeat the entire purpose of Uber. Uber is not meant to be a full-time job. It's meant to be something which you do on the side to make some extra cash. But perhaps the people who are using that as regular income don't seem to understand that. This is Hot News Talk Radio and hotnewstalkradio.com. This is Hot News Talk Radio on TuneIn as well. Get the TuneIn app and search for Hot News Talk Radio.
This is a mob mode. This is a mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas, every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. The gunman who killed 4 Marines in Tennessee had reportedly made trips overseas.
Federal investigators are reportedly looking into long trips to Jordan and Yemen that 24-year-old Muslim Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz took in 2014. And what about his father, who we're also told was on a terror watch list years ago and then removed from that list?
Fox Radio's Jeff Manasso in Chattanooga. A Detroit mom who killed 2 of her 4 children and put their bodies in a freezer, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Judge Dana Hathaway addressing Michelle Blair.
Thankfully, that house of horrors that you created is no longer in existence. I do pray that your remaining children will recover. They will. From what they saw and endured in that household.
Blair had pleaded guilty 3 weeks ago, claiming she killed them because they had abused a sibling. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
This kills the man, or at least this kills the this kills the business. Yeah, federal regulation might be doing a bit of harm, we'll say, to the sharing economy. So what's the sharing economy, you might be asking? Well, this is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. The sharing economy is something that's, I don't know if it's new, but we're just now seeing new examples of it. We'll put it that way. We're seeing new examples of the sharing economy in ways that really haven't been put forward before, mostly because they really couldn't have. Think about it. We have apps now. We have the internet now that has been changing so many things just in the last, 20 years. And that's an interesting angle, too, when you think about it. Considering how old I am, which is not very, I have not known a world without an internet. Like, I haven't known a world, I barely know a world where there was dial-up. And that leads to interesting dialogue that can be made about the past and the future when it comes to the internet. And when it comes to how business has changed so much thanks to the internet. So thanks to the internet, and we now have ways of knowing where businesses are that weren't really there before. Now, people are going to complain about that, and people are going to say, oh, mass communications is really going to be the death knell for the small economy, the local economy. No, I don't think so at all. Mass communications are really going to help to prop up and strengthen the local economy more than anything. But think about it this way. I don't know where your business is. How do I know where your business is? Now, yeah, there's word of mouth. Absolutely. That's a huge factor. But let's say none of my friends have been to your business. I've never been to your business, but I would be a patron should I know about where it is. Well, how am I going to know about that? Well, yeah, the phone book, but I don't read the phone book. Why would I read the phone book, right? I mean, unless the internet has gone out, I don't really look at the phone book. I think my last phone book is from like 2005, or maybe it's 1995. I don't remember which. So I don't really look at that too much. However, I'm looking for different businesses of a sort. Let's say I'm looking for a cool restaurant of a certain type. I'm looking for a Greek restaurant here in Chattanooga. I don't know where they are. So I Google that, Greek restaurant Chattanooga. Oh, hey, look, there's, so-and-so's. Hey, look, there's souvlaki's. There's so-and-so's. Hey, man, now I know about where your restaurant is. And that means I'm going to go spend my money at your business, thus putting my cash into the local economy. So people who say that the internet is going to kill small business, no, there's no way. If anything, it's going to strengthen small business. Now, there might be problems of competition where small businesses can't compete with larger businesses simply due to a lack of evolution on the side of that small business due to the internet changing the way people think about things. But are people thinks about? Changing the way we collectively think about things, put it that way. And that's certainly going to happen. Businesses are going to die, but you know what? Businesses die anyway. That's just how it is. That's the nature of a true capitalistic system, is you see businesses come and businesses go. And people think that that's a terrible thing. People think, man, this guy's out of the job now thanks to the internet. Well, there are other job opportunities, and certainly it's a terrible thing when somebody loses a job. That's never a good situation. But there are still opportunities, even in local economy, where there's a small business that's starting up and they need somebody who's skilled in sales, as an example. You lost your job in sales at another small business thanks to Kohl's running you out. You were a small clothes store. I don't know. Well, now you can work as a salesman at this new startup. You just have to be connected. You have to be on the internet, really. That's the only way to survive in the present day, is to actually just be on the internet. A lot of people think that the internet is going to be the death of us all. It's really not. The internet is going to actually help local economy more than hurt it in the long run. And people have been afraid of the internet, possibly due to lack of understanding, possibly due to fear. But really, the internet is not going to hurt anything. It's actually going to help out more than anything. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing a lot of decentralization in a very positive way. People think that centralization and a strong core is what's going to save everything. It's really not, because if you bring down the guy at the top, you've brought down everything. Okay, think of what's a strong central thing that we can think of in recent history. This is going to be not a comparison, but think about what happened with back in the days of Nazi Germany. When you took down Hitler, the whole thing sort of collapsed. Now, thanks to, there were economic reasons for that, and there are a lot of other reasons for that, but that's a good example of you take down the head and the whole thing sort of falls apart. Okay, think about Greek mythology. Hercules cut off the head of Cyclops, and that was the death of Cyclops. That was it. But what about the Hydra? That's decentralized, many heads. You cut off one and another one grows back. That's local economy, is a Hydra. It's a mighty Hydra, which can't be killed with one blow. And that's local economy because it's decentralized. But a national economy, you have things like NASDAQ. You have things like the New York Stock Exchange. You take down one of those, you've pretty much taken down the whole thing. You have the S&P 500. You have NASDAQ. You have all these other indexes, and you have the broad national economy, which is really centralized on one point, which is the stock exchange. You take that down, whole thing's gone. The whole economy collapses. However, a local economy, you take down a big business that's here, say a factory closes down, you haven't killed the local economy. Yeah, a lot of people are out of the job, but those people now have opportunity to start up small businesses. You haven't killed the economy. You've just cut off one head with opportunities for more to grow. That's local economy. That's decentralization. Lots of people think that decentralization is a bad idea. It really isn't. In the long run, it's going to help us out more than anything. And the internet is helping us to decentralize in much more diverse ways. It's our diverse thinking, it's our diverse culture, and it's our decentralized ideas. It's our decentralized culture that's really actually going to help us out in the long run, not take us down. Well, according to Ars Technica, the sharing economy is being further scrutinized by the feds. A new policy guidance document was released earlier this week by the Department of Labor over the status of contract workers versus employees. This 14-page guidance doesn't actually represent any new law, but it does suggest that various regulatory agencies, including the federal level, are actually looking much more closely at how contract workers are created, or treated, I should say. A number of high-profile tech companies, including Uber, Lyft, HomeJoy, and Instacart, have come under scrutiny in recent months as an increasing number of workers have challenged the regime under which they work. Just last month, under the California Labor Commission, they issued a ruling in favor of a former Uber employee, ordering the company to reimburse her for costs incurred while driving for Uber. Many of those companies are now facing lawsuits arguing that their workers should in fact be treated as employees, where Social Security and other benefits will be paid by the company rather than independent laborers. The labor guidance document states, misclassification of employees as independent contractors is found in an increasing number of workplaces in the United States, in part reflecting larger restructuring of business organizations. When employees improperly classify employees, or rather employers improperly classify employees as independent contractors, the employees may not receive important workplace protections such as the minimum wage, overtime compensation, unemployment insurance, and workers' compensation. Misclassification also results in lower tax revenues for the government, and an uneven playing field for employers who properly classify their workers. Although independent contracting relationships can be advantageous for workers and businesses, some employees may be intentionally misclassified as a means to cut costs and avoid compliance with labor laws. Now, there are rather okay arguments for labor laws, and there are rather okay arguments against labor laws. I'm not going to really take a position on that, but I will say this. Okay, I will take a position on that. Down with the unions. No, really, it's interesting because I don't think a lot of people realize that their wants for the short term are going to hurt the long term. Think about it this way. let's say I work as an Uber driver, and that's my main business for some reason. Instead of having another job, I simply am an Uber driver. Okay, well, Uber was never meant to be set up as your main source of income. So you're a contractor. It's not like a taxi system where that is your job. No, Uber is meant to be a passive thing, kind of like a passive investment, except it's more like passive work. It's just passive contract work. You do that as a sort of a side thing that you don't do full time. There we go. Couldn't think of the word time for some reason. You don't do it full time. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but then let's say you have that job as your full-time employment. So you might be forgiven for wanting benefits and for wanting unemployment and all sorts of different social security and retirement, what have you. But that was never meant to be the purpose of Uber. You're a contractor. You're not a full-time employee. It's not really the company's fault that you're using it in a way that was never really intended. And so you sue the company, and the federal system says, hey, that's not fair, and determines that Uber now has to classify every contractor as an employee. Uber can't afford that and goes under, and you've killed the whole thing. Now, that might not necessarily happen that Uber can't afford it, but lots of changes will have to happen, and lots of expensive changes will have to happen. And that's where the death of Uber could come in. So people maybe don't understand that this is the whole system is really dependent on non-dependency. Really, it's dependent on workers not depending on Uber, and that's the system of Uber was never designed for people to use that as their main source of income. It's a passive investment. It's just a side thing that you do. And certainly some people don't really understand that or choose to ignore that in order to gain benefit. And there's good arguments for that, but I would disagree that Uber should be classified as an employer. The guidance relies heavily on Dial America, which is a 30-year-old case involving a stay-at-home mom who filed computer punch cards with phone numbers and returned them to the company. This is Michael Leroy, a labor law professor at University of Illinois. So he told ours by email, saying that they were paid piece rate and could apparently control their time from 0 to unlimited hours, just like Uber drivers. Well, Dial America signed them on as independent contractors and also said that they had full control of their time at home or wherever. Well, as the professor noted, a federal court rejected that argument, finding that the labor provided here was core to the enterprise. Hence, they were employees, and as a result, collected lots of back pay and overtime because they were paid only piece rate, another tie into Uber. He said, I would call this the opening brief in the Department of Labor's push to bring a complaint against Uber and similar forms. Byron Goldstein, there's a surprise, an Oakland-based lawyer who is currently representing two clients who are suing HomeJoy, the on-demand home cleaning service, told ours that this new memo is good news for workers. Well, it might be bad news for businesses, though. That's kind of the thing. And when you say that, people will paint you as some heartless guy who doesn't care about the worker. But no, really, this is an argument for both the employer and the worker, or the contractor and the contract offerer. Perhaps the contract giver and the contract receiver. It's an argument for both, because the contractor can have a full-time job and get extra money on the side, and the contract provider can then get money in a reasonable way and have a less involved system where there's no worrying about employees and benefits and all that sort of thing. Again, it was never structured to be an employee-employer system, but some people don't really want to see it that way. So, oh well. Well, on the topic of clickbait, something that is really frustrating sometimes is when you see people share articles on Facebook that you know are just false. When you try to convince them that they don't really listen to you. Well, this is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. You can save half off now. Go to hotnewstalkradio.com. Click on the half off link for great deals. Hot News Talk Radio is on Twitter as well. And Hot News Talk Radio is saving you money. That's AM 1240. Hot News Talk Radio, we've got you covered. Well, on the topic of clickbait. Oh boy, clickbait. It's one of those things where it just kills you. You know, if you know that this article is false or what this article is positing is false, it just drives you nuts. Because you see things like, you know, just as an example, you see Obama wants to ban Confederate flags, or Obama bans flying of American flags on front porches and that sort of thing. And we all know that that's not really possible, because that would mean a constitutional amendment. That would mean a huge infringement of the First Amendment. And there would be all sorts of different things that would have to come into play to actually pull that off, that the president alone is not capable of doing. So really, even if that happened, the headline should be Congress bans Confederate flag flying more so than Obama bans Confederate flag flying. People like to use the president as a punching bag. I'm not a fan of the guy either, but honestly, come on. It's not everything that happens is not actually the president's fault. There's also Congress, which is kind of lazy and kind of doesn't do its job. But I mean, that's Congress for you, right? Which Congress has ever done an actually good job ever? You know, I mean, come on, it's politics. People who are politicians are going to do a very bad job like 99% of the time. I can name maybe like 3 politicians who I really actually liked. And that's 3 over the last like 200 years. So yeah, politicians are tending to be kind of bad. And that's always been the case. It's not like we were so much better off with politicians back in the turn of the century. Not really. Or we were so much better off with congressmen back in the 1790s. Not really. I mean, there were opposing viewpoints back then too. There was huge hot debate over serious topics back then too. And but anyway, so clickbait has changed a lot when it comes to the news and news gathering. It's easy to be misinformed in the age of the internet, and it's easy to be well informed in the age of the internet too. You have to use critical thinking. You have to cite your source. You have to, or rather, you have to get a credible source that's not, conservativetimesdaily.org or whatever, because chances are that's not really a reputable site. Same goes for like socialistnewsrightnow.com, if that's even a thing. You know, that's not going to be a reputable news site because it obviously has a political spin, even more so than the other news sites, and you're not going to get the real facts. You're going to get somebody's blog. That's the thing. You might like the guy's blog, and that's cool, but don't try to pass it off as a real news story because it's not. It's some guy's blog. You know, he just happens to use the word Tribune or Daily or Sun or Times in his title. That doesn't make it an actual news site. 9 times out of 10, you see that a lot, and it's not real. We all have that Facebook friend who constantly shares stuff that we know is not true, but does it anyway, saying, conservatives want to give guns to old ladies, and we know that's not true, but it pops up anyway. Or socialists in Congress trying to eliminate the minimum wage and make it even higher. We know that's not true, but it keeps happening anyway. People keep sharing stuff like that, and it drives us all crazy. So how do we subvert that? Well, we ourselves can make ourselves quite well informed by actually checking our sources. Know if your source is a reputable one. Chances are, if it has any sort of political title in the title of the source, probably not reputable. Be it conservative or liberal or whatever, or anarchist or socialist or federalist or anti-federalist, it doesn't matter. If it has any sort of political spin in the title of it, probably not a reputable source. You got to keep that in mind. Now, again, you might like it as a blog, and that's fine. You can like what you want as a blog, and that's cool. But it's not a legit news source. It's some guy's blog. It's some angry guy who writes political comics in his spare time, writing about politics on his blog, and he just happens to use the word Tribune in the name of it. That doesn't mean it's a reputable source. You got to keep that in mind. Now, a reputable source that can be kind of questionable. I mean, yeah, there's like CNN, and there's Fox, and there's CNBC, and there's NBC, and there's ABC, and there's Hot News Talk Radio, and there's all sorts of different reputable sources. But you have to be sure that you're actually getting the news from those sources. Now, keep in mind, too, a lot of those news sites don't actually create the news themselves, as in they don't actually write the articles. There's AP and there's Reuters, and there's all sorts of different news agencies that put out news for these other outlets to reproduce. So you have to keep that in mind, too. Not everything is actually original to the source that you're obtaining. So the best course of action is to actually get it from the most original source you can. So it'll be reposted by, say, RT, which got it from Reuters. So you have to look back at the original source and read that article, and then read the RT article and see if it adds anything that's actually factual. So just as an example, you have to be careful about that sort of thing. And there's Al Jazeera too, and all sorts of different news sites. But that's sort of critical thinking 101 when it comes to journalism. You can't just look at one thing from one guy and say, well, that's the truth. Look at multiple sources and check. Make sure. And make sure that you look at both sides of the aisle, too. Look at both sides of the argument to sort of gain a clever and healthy middle ground so that you know what's really going on. So you're not just one of those guys who spouts rhetoric and sort of regurgitates rhetoric and passes it off as fact, because you're not. And that's not really factual reporting. That's extremely biased reporting, which everybody does anyway. I'm biased. You're biased. We're all biased. But we have to try to overcome that in our reporting to be as factual as possible. Sometimes when I'm talking about the news, I have to keep my mouth shut when we're talking about opinionated stuff, right? Like I could say that, just as an example, I could say, well, the Gulf of Tonkin incident was actually falsified by the CIA. We could say that, but that's not really relevant to the story. We want to say that, but that's for the other show. That's for today's show, not for the news at 5, right? Just as an example. If I want to spout an opinion, I can do that here on Digital Drive, but I'm not going to do that on Hot News Live at 5 because that's the news live at 5. I'm not going to do that on that show. Factual reporting is what happens on Hot News Live at 5, not opinion. We see that a lot even in cable news. I watch cable news, and 9 times out of 10, it's an opinion show. And they'll spout their opinions and say that it's fact, but really it's just opinion. And we keep seeing that. We see opinion after opinion after opinion on some news show, but it's just an opinion show. Okay, as an example, we have like O'Reilly, which is on at 8 on Fox. And he says opinion stuff, and he's free to do that. And it's cool that he has a show and everything. Yeah, but it's opinion. It's not like factual reporting. It's just opinion. And he'll say, I think that such and such. And then he'll say the facts are such and such. And even when he says the facts are, and not just him, but anybody, they may not actually be the true facts. It might have a spin to it. So that's the basic idea of clickbait. It's a headline that's designed to evoke an emotional response that may not necessarily be based on fact. Well, according to The Verge, Uber is trolling New York City and the mayor of New York in its new app. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. And Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. It's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. And Nuganomics.com with David Toulis is coming up in just a few minutes here on Hot News Talk Radio. He's going to talk about local economy and free markets here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. So according to The Verge, if you're in New York City and you open the Uber app today, you'll find a new ride option next to its list of usual choices, de Blasio. Huh? Now, it's not a way to get a ride, obviously. Instead, it's a way to needle the New York City mayor and try to get Uber users to pressure him to back off on proposed legislation that could seriously hamper Uber's growth efforts in the city. Uber is dealing with pushback from regulators and taxi companies all around the world, but in New York City, it's about to face one of its biggest fights yet. Mayor Bill de Blasio is backing a city council proposal that would temporarily freeze all new licenses for hire vehicles. The freeze would come so that the city could create a study on traffic congestion, which the administration believes is getting worse thanks to ride sharing. New York Taxi and Limousine Commission is backing it, of course, saying the onslaught of vehicles is so tremendous that it seems actually irresponsible not to legislate in some way. Well, we're seeing an example here of old school legacy taxi companies that are being threatened by a new school, new way of doing things. And in order to quash that threat, they're wanting to pass legislation. Oh boy. Legislation in order to stop competition is not the way to handle it. That's certainly not the free market way to handle it, but that's how a lot of businesses choose to handle competition. They'll lobby. How often do we see lobbying? Think about the movie industry back in the 1980s when VCRs had just come out. Remember tapes? Remember those? I don't, but you might. Remember tapes? The VCR was a big threat, they perceived anyway, to the movie industry. And everyone in the movie industry said, oh man, tapes are going to ruin everything. Nobody's going to go to the theaters. They're going to tape movies off of TV, and they're going to fast forward through the commercials. That's terrible. Well, guess what? A new industry popped up out of it. The anti-VCR lobbyists were shown to be totally wrong and totally out of the picture because they were out of date, man. They just didn't know what was going on. They weren't hip and with it. And you have to be hip and with it when you're talking about business. You really do. It's crucial. So it turned out that the VCR actually brought about a new era for home video, and the movie companies were able to actually sell its movies, and that was it. You had movies being sold that were on video that made the movie industry lots of money. Now we have Netflix, which contracts out movies from the movie industry, and again, makes it tons of money, and it's not a threat to the movie business at all. It actually is a help. So how could, say, New York Taxi Company or Taxi Cab and Limousine Commission or whatever figure out a way to compete with the ride-sharing companies that doesn't actually involve lobbying or legislation? Well, actually, technically, it could launch its own ride-sharing wing of the Yellow Cab. I mean, you could do that. It could be done. And maybe ride-sharing is actually the future of taxi cabs, and the whole employee-employer thing is out the window. People are so hung up on the old way of doing things that sometimes we think that it's always the right way, when that's not necessarily true. Maybe the old way of doing things is actually just outdated and needs to be fixed. And sometimes the old way of doing things is actually the right way to do things. Look at the local economy system. I mean, national economies are actually kind of a new idea. International trading is kind of a new idea when it comes right down to it. And the stock market is really new when it comes down to it. And it's bound to collapse. It's the new way of doing things, and it's not necessarily right. And local economy is actually the better way of doing things. And it's old. It's really old school, but it actually works. And it can be adapted to be very new school. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about digital economy and quite a bit more. And Nuganomics.com and David Toulis is coming up in just a few minutes right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. And again, this is Hot News Talk Radio and Nuganomics.com and David Toulis is coming up. He's going to talk about local economy and free markets from his own very Nuga-centric position, which he brings to the table. And really, Nuga-centrism isn't necessarily exclusive to Chattanooga, because you can be New York City-centric, or you can be Cleveland-centric, or what have you. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. I'm Russell. This is Digital Drive.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the
Arnie